4 of our story series, and today I will be speaking about the story of Jesus walking on water. This is one of my favorite stories, and this story, just to set the scene for you, this story actually takes place the same day that Jesus fed the 5,000. So we heard that story a few weeks ago. It was an awesome message. If you've missed it, you should go check it out. But basically, Jesus has just done this incredible miracle. He had a long day of speaking. People got hungry. He took just a little bit and made a lot, fed 5,000 people. Incredible, incredible miracle. And then everyone's tired. The day's kind of winding down. And I think this was really gracious of Jesus. He says to his disciples, y'all get in the boat, head across to this next location that they're heading to. And he says he will go ahead and dismiss the crowd. He'll take care of it. And then he's going to go up and have some time for prayer. And Rebecca, you can throw that picture up of the map real quick. I'll show you guys. I'm a very visual learner. There's going to be a lot of visuals today. Just bear with me. This is how I learn. So right there where that yellow dot is, that's a roundabout where they believe that Jesus fed the 5,000. And then this purple path here is the path that the disciples were taking. The Sea of Galilee is 13 miles long, 8 miles wide, has an average depth of 25 feet and a maximum depth of 126 feet. It's a really large lake, basically. And my brain, the way it works, I like learning. I said in the first service, I was driving the other day and I just randomly thought, how do nuclear reactors work? And so I spent the next 4 hours listening to podcasts on how they work and nuclear fission and all kinds of stuff. So that's how my brain works. So when I started this story, I was like, how big is the Sea of Galilee? How deep is it? What kind of storms do they have? So I went on this in-depth study. But basically, because of the region, it's very mountainous, and just the climate, all of those factors play into an ability where the Sea of Galilee actually gets pretty severe weather patterns. And they come really quickly, and they come really strongly. And so that's kind of the scene for our story today. So picking up in Matthew 14:22, says, immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. The wind was against it. Have any of you ever felt like the wind was against you? I know I have definitely felt like the wind was against you. Have you ever been really trying to follow Jesus, really pursuing him, trying to do what was right, but you just feel like the wind's against you? You know, you were really trying to give Jesus this habit, or trying to give him an attitude, or trying to be a better husband or a better spouse or just a better person, but the wind was against you. John 16:33 says, in this godless world, you will continue to experience difficulties, but take heart, I've conquered the world. Difficulties are a part of life. So sometimes the wind's going to be against us, but we don't let the wind determine our direction. I've got an object lesson for you guys today. Again, visual learner. Also, I'm about to pull something from back here that you were not expecting. Leaf blower. I had it tucked behind the LED wall in the first service, and I just like pulled it out. I told my dad, he's going to be like, you used a leaf blower? So this strap, thank you to Marcus, this strap represents us, okay? And so we're having a good day and blowing this way. Can you feel that in the front row? Feels good? Cool, y'all. So we're having a good day, then we're having a bad day. Uh-oh, now we're going this way. This is all happening the same day. Good day, bad day. You get the point. Easily swayed by the wind. But what God calls us to is to be anchored in him. That way, when the wind comes and the wind blows, we're not swayed by it. We're not changed by it. We're anchored. Do not let the wind determine your direction. Thanks to Marcus. Hide this back here for the next service. Thank you for humoring my visual learning. All right, so this was something that I really appreciate about the disciples. So they set out sometime in the evening at Jesus' instruction, and they wanted so badly to do what he said. In fact, this journey that they took normally took about 2 hours. So on calm seas, on a good day, this journey should take about 2 hours. They would usually sail across because the coastline was really rocky. It was hard to walk. So again, we know this was supposed to take about 2 hours, and we see from both Mark and John's accounts. So something I want to mention, you'll hear me come back to today. This story is actually told in Matthew, it's told in Mark, and it's told in John. And we'll be referencing different parts of each of them and each of their tellings of it. I think it kind of brings a wholeness to the story. But we see in John 16:19, it says, when they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, and then in Mark 6:47 through 48, it says, later that night, the boat was in the middle of the lake, and he was alone on land when he saw the disciples straining at the oars because the wind was against them. So again, paint a picture for you. These guys left way long time ago, and they are trying to do what Jesus wants them to do. They're trying to get across the lake. They're trying to go where he wants them, and the wind's against them. It's hard. They're straining at the oars. I'm not a sailor. I don't like boats. I get really motion sick, but I have rowed before. Rowing is tiring. Rowing against the wind, very tiring. And again, no sailor, but logically here, I was thinking about this story. So here we are. We're in a boat. Disciples were rowing, trying to do what God wants us to do. The wind's against us, okay? So let's say we get tired and we stop rowing. What's going to happen? Well, the wind's going to take us right back where we came from. And I think some of you here have felt the wind against you, and you've gave in, and now you're right back where you didn't want to be. You're right back where you came from. Right back in that habit, right back in that sin, that struggle, right back to where you didn't want to be. And I can relate to that. In Romans, the Apostle Paul says, I do not understand what I do, for what I want to do, I do not do. But what I hate, I do. How often do we find ourselves trying to follow God, trying to be who he wants us to be? The wind comes against us. We lose heart. We end up right back where we were, where we didn't want to be. But take heart. All you have to do is get back in the boat and get to work, pushing towards what Jesus wants us to do. And I love this about the disciples. These bros had been rowing against the wind for hours in adversity, trying to follow God. Also, a quick side note, in Mark 48, as we read just a second ago, it says, he saw the disciples straining at the oars. Jesus was on the mountain. Okay, I don't know if he physically could see them. I mean, I guess he was on a mountain. They were out on the lake. A storm was happening, so visibility, who knows? I'm sure Jesus had excellent eyesight, but I'm not sure the actual visibility situation there, but I do know this, that no matter what you're going through, Jesus sees you. He saw the disciples straining at the oars. He sees you. He sees the effort. You know, he sees you rowing. He sees you straining against the wind, and he's always there. He's always there to help. Picking our story back, Matthew 14:25. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. It's a ghost, they said, as they cried out in fear. This part always makes me laugh a little bit. Honestly, I find myself judging the disciples a bit, and it's probably rude, but when you read the Bible as a observer of the stories, it's easy to see all these miraculous things Jesus did. Like he healed this person, he raised someone from the dead, like did all this crazy stuff, and yet we often find the disciples in these places of doubt. And I'm just like, how? How could you doubt? You saw this person literally get raised from the dead. And in some of these times of feeling that way, I really felt like the Lord said, you do the same thing. You've seen me be faithful. You've seen me in your own life come through. You've seen me answer that prayer. You've seen me help me in that way. And then you still doubt. You still don't know what's happening. Although still, again, I feel like the disciples, they just saw Jesus feed 5,000 people. Like he just spawned in a bunch of fish and bread. Like how how does that happen? And then not only did that happen, but they left him over there. And they went out on the boat. Like, how was he going to meet up with them? I just have a lot of questions in this story. So I feel like if Jesus wasn't in my boat, I left him over here, I'm heading this way, and I see someone walking on the water, I would hope that my response wouldn't be, it's a ghost. I would be like, oh, there's Jesus. But probably I would be like, it's a ghost. Because again, in our lives, how often do we miss the provision that Jesus has for us? Sometimes God's provision doesn't look like we think it will. And we become afraid of what ultimately will be our deliverance. So when my dad tells this story, he's the youngest of 5. He's very mischievous. He likes to do pranks. He likes to startle people. And he always says that when the disciples saw Jesus walking on water, if he had been Jesus, he would have dipped under the waves really quick, come up on the other side of the boat, and then, he said he could have everybody walking on water. Thankfully, we serve a gracious God whose perfect love casts out all fear, and he is very quick to dismiss our fears. So picking back up in Matthew 27, it says, "But Jesus immediately said to them, 'Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid.'" I love that. Immediately, that's a key word there. They thought he was a ghost. Immediately, Jesus calmed their fears. He said, "Take heart, it is I, don't be afraid." I also find this really fascinating. So I'm about to read to you both Mark and John as well. So this is Matthew 27 that says, "Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid." Mark 6:50 says, "Immediately he spoke to them and said, 'Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid.'" And then John 6:20 says, "But he said to them, 'It is I, don't be afraid.'" Again, same story told by 3 different disciples. And if you've ever read their versions of the story, they're quite different. They definitely told the stories in different ways, had different details they included. All 3 of them, the exact same wording. "Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid." I felt like the Lord said to me when I was preparing that, somebody needs to hear that this morning. It is I, don't be afraid. Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid. The phrase, "it is I," holds significance in the New Testament, particularly in the Gospels, as it often carries a deeper spiritual meaning. In the context of Jesus saying, "It is I," this is signifying his divinity and his authority as the Son of God. In John 6:35, we see him say, "I am the bread of life." John 8:12, "I am the light of the world." John 8:58, "Before Abraham was, I am." Exodus 3:14, "Tell the people of Israel, I am sent me to you." And John 14:6, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." Why am I saying all this to you? Because I think Jesus was telling his disciples in a not so subtle way that it was him, the Son of God, that he was powerful and he was there with them. So there was no reason to be afraid. The theologian, Dr. Tom Constable, said it this way, and I really liked it. He said, "Where Jesus is present, fear is unwarranted." Where Jesus is present, fear is unwarranted. I am is bigger than anything we could ever face in life, and he is for us. Picking back up in verse 28, "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," he said. Then Peter got out of the boat, walked on water, and came towards Jesus. So I love Peter. He's one of my favorite disciples. He's a man of action. I really like doing things. I'm a doer. If I can do something to fix it, I will. And I like how Peter was like, all right, if Jesus, if that's you, then I would rather be out here in the storm with you than in the false security of this boat right now. I want to be out there with you. Peter understood that being in the storm with Jesus is safer than being on a boat without him. Verse 30, "When he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, 'Lord, save me.'" So getting out of the boat took incredible faith. I mean, we really did. Like, I actually have a picture. Rebecca, could you throw that up real quick? So all of us, we have mental pictures when we imagine Bible stories. I know you all do. And for some reason, for me, when I thought Jesus walking on water, I just never thought too much about the fact that it was in a storm. I'm just picturing him walking on water, still calm water. But this was a storm. This was a big storm. These waves were probably 8 to 10 feet. And so this was hectic. Like, I'm wondering if Jesus got a calf workout walking on the water. I mean, this is not an easy walk. And Peter stepping out of the boat was not an easy thing. That was a big faith moment. But faith is not a once-off decision. And some of you have had incredible faith. Some of us have had incredible faith in unthinkable adversity. But faith fatigue has robbed us of a trust we once knew. And this happened to Peter. Peter got out of the boat. He's the only disciple that did it. He got out of the boat, huge faith, crazy faith. But as he walked, as the storm grew, as he saw the waves, as he heard the crash of the water, his faith was fatigued and he began to sink. Don't let faith fatigue rob you of a trust you once knew. Verse 31. Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" I feel like this is a little harsh on Peter. Because it took a lot of faith to get out of that boat and to walk on water. It's the only disciple that did. The rest of them, they didn't get called "you of little faith," but they didn't even get out of the boat. But the epiphany I had that God gave me when I was reading this story is that partial trust is actually not the same as trusting. In fact, partial trust is not trust at all. It's doubt. And so Jesus was making a point here. Wasn't trying to give Peter a hard time, but he was saying, you trusted me. You got out of the boat, but you didn't fully trust me. And partial trust is doubt. Because if there's any lack of full trust, then you're actually doubting. And I have a really good example of this in my own life. So again, been to Zambia a lot of times, and in 2011, I had an opportunity to go on a trip. And I had actually been the year before. We went to a place called Naualau, and we shared the gospel. It was amazing. We had a great time. We were able to establish a church and share the gospel, and it was just an amazing time. So then the next year we're coming back. We're going to go to a village called Mauakalipe. It's about an hour and a half drive from the previous spot, Naualau. And we've been told by the Zambian people there that were setting us up to go that word was spreading of the gospel, that villages surrounding Naualau were hearing the gospel and wanting to hear more about Jesus. And so I was super excited to go. So we get there, we drive, we get to Mauakalipe. Again, this is a really tough trip. So normally when we go on these trips, when we get to the bush, we'll unpack the cars, get camp set up. It's really, again, informal. You're there for 4 or 5 days. So we'll greet the village, we'll say hello, and then we'll say, we'll see you tomorrow, we'll come visit you, and then we'll invite you to a service tomorrow night. That's typically how it goes. Well, we get there, and the whole village is just waiting for us. They're just standing there. And so we say that to them, and so they all kind of take a step back, and we start to work. Honestly, at this point, I'm in full work mode. I'm building the fence, I'm digging a toilet, I'm doing all kinds of stuff. And this guy comes back over to one of the translators, says something, and the translator comes to my dad, and he says, they want to know if there's something that we can tell them. And so my dad says, yeah. Actually, just tell them to come back tonight. Let us set camp up. We'll do a service tonight, which is not normally something we would do. So they kind of step back a little bit more, and then they come back, and the guy says something again to the translator, comes back, and he said, they said they've been waiting for a year to hear about Jesus. Is there something you can tell them about him now? I mean, what do you say to that? It was like, yes, of course. So an amazing service. Every single person in the village raises their hand to accept Christ. They were ready. They were waiting. and just an incredible, powerful, powerful moment. One that I actually missed. I was asleep. I had been frantically setting camp up, and then I just tanked out. And when I woke up, I just see this crazy church service happening over here. And my dad comes up, and he's like, dude, everyone in the village just got saved. I was like, what? What do we do now? Do we go home? It was amazing. It actually created a really cool opportunity for discipleship, because, often on these trips, we're just sharing the gospel. And some of these people, or the whole village, had just gotten saved. And so it was really an opportunity to share them, okay, what does that mean? What does it mean to follow Christ? What does it mean to live with him? So I really got to work with a guy who was called Tuna Mike. And in Zambia, the average age, is actually like 24. So people just don't live long. And particularly in that area, it's very impoverished, very malnourished. So people aren't usually very big either. And so Tuna Mike he was a pretty big, stocky guy. And so tuna means big. They called him Tuna Mike. CJ's a big dude. Every time we go there, CJ's tuna. They're like, tuna, tuna, tuna. I guarantee you he's being called tuna right now. I know. Yeah. They've never seen someone as big as CJ. They're like, this guy is epic. But Tuna Mike was awesome, and he was a worker. He and his nephew, they did a lot of farming. And so he asked me if I wanted to go with him to cut rice. And again, I've been discipling him quite a bit, and I was really excited to. I was like, yes, cutting rice in the Zambezi floodplain, that sounds like a really cool story. I would love to do that. And I would love to go help you and tell you more about Jesus. So I wrangled one of my cousins who was on the trip. He's from Rosebud, Arkansas, and he's a good redneck and a farmer, son of a farmer. And I was like, cut rice with me. And he was like, yes, let's do it. So we get up in the morning, we go with them to cut rice, and we're walking down the path to cut rice. It was pretty far to where we were going to go. And we come across another person who's walking towards us, and he has just been in the rice fields, had some rice, and he and Tuna Mike start talking. They're having a nice conversation. I have no idea what they're saying. Don't speak Lozi. Really good at smiling. But no idea what they're saying. And then, often you get weird looks, because in that particular part of Western Zambia, it's very rare to see a white person, a Makua. And so often you're just used to people being like, what are you doing? But this guy, he stopped and he pointed at me and he laughed. And that was new. I was like, not sure what that meant. So I asked our translator, who he was not translating everything. So I was like, hey, what were they talking about? And so he said, Mike was just sharing with them why you guys were here, that you told him about the gospel and telling him he should come to the campfire and hear about Jesus. And I'm like, yes, Mike, go, boy. Like, he's witnessing, he's like doing great. And then he said, but then he also just was asking how Mike got you guys to come help him cut rice, because he also wants help cutting rice. I'm thinking, all right, well, we could probably help him cut rice too. And then he said, and he wanted to know if you guys knew about the leeches. But he said that very nonchalant, like way too nonchalant for what he just said. And then the translator just keeps going. And I'm like, did he say leeches? Maybe that didn't translate right. So I asked him again. He's like, yeah, the leeches. So now I'm freaking out. I have a bit of an irrational fear of leeches. I have no idea why. I have a picture of a leech, actually. So you can all be disgusted as well. Yeah, that's why. They're disgusting. And so to be honest with you, though, this next picture is really what I was picturing in that moment of what I was going to. It's pretty sure that was going to happen. No, but for real, me and Seth right here, we were having a real conversation. We were like, can we do this? Like, can we still go cut rice with these people? And we noticed in this moment, I don't know how we didn't notice before. Apparently we shouldn't be detectives, but Mike and his nephew were wearing waders, like high waders. They knew about the leeches. They didn't tell us about the leeches. And I've never seen waders in Zambia, but both of them, they were covered up. I'm wearing gym shorts and a cut t-shirt. And so we're just talking. We're like, well, we've been preaching the gospel. We've been saying that Jesus is, he's bigger than the devil. He's bigger than the witch doctor. He can protect you. You don't have to be afraid. You can trust him. He's got you, and you can put your trust in him. And so I'm like, man, we can't say that Jesus can handle the devil and all of this stuff, but not leeches. We leave for leeches. And so we're both like, all right, we're going to do it. So like Peter, we got out of the boat. We saw the storm. We were freaking out, but we got out of the boat. And so we walked down into the water. It's deep, way deeper than I wanted it to be. As we're trying to get to where we're going, it got almost up to my neck a couple places of just walking through water. And also we're in Zambia, so in my head I'm like, are there crocodiles in here? A little bit worse than a leech, but just barely. And so we get to where we're cutting rice, the water's waist deep, and I'm vigilant does not describe what I was. I was on a swivel. I am just like, I'm the slowest rice cutter in the history of the world because anything that touched my leg, I was like, wah! And I was just paying very close attention. And I felt like the Lord said to me while I was working, he said, Jacob, do you trust me? And I was like, yes, God, I trust you. I'm in sub-Saharan Africa, waist deep in leech water. What are you talking about? I got out of the boat. Yes, I trust you. It's kind of indignant. I'm just still slowly cutting rice. Anything that touches me, I'm freaking out. And I felt like God asked again. He said, Jacob, do you trust me? And I was like, yes, Lord, we just went over this. We just talked about it. I got out of the boat. I trust you. I'm in the leech water. What else do you want me to do? Keep going, still freaking out. And then I felt like one more time, God said, Jacob, do you trust me? And I was like, yes, God, I trust you. And he said, stop looking at your feet. And that just rocked me. It just hit me. Stop looking at your feet. Because partial trust is not trust at all. It's doubt. And in that moment, I was missing out on what God wanted me to do, honestly, because I was only partially trusting him. I thought I was trusting him. I was trying. I was rowing against the waves, against the wind. I got out of the boat, was in the leech water, but I wasn't enjoying the moment. I wasn't discipling. I wasn't trusting. And so often in our lives, we don't fully trust God. And some of you this morning, I feel like the Lord asked me to tell you today to stop looking at your feet. Whatever that thing is, you know what it is. You know what he spoke to you. You know what he's asked you to do. Fully give it to him. Fully trust him. Because he's got you. And in my story, after that moment, I said, all right, Jesus, I'm going to trust you. I cut rice for 3 hours. I actually got so comfortable that me and Seth were swimming. I went completely underwater, was sitting neck deep. It's probably making questionable decisions with how disgusting the water was because I just was not worried about it. And I could have come out of there and had 30 leeches attached to me, and God still would have been worth putting my trust in because outcomes don't determine trust. Character does. And God's character is worthy of our trust. But I didn't. I had no leeches, saw no leeches, and it was actually a testimony of God's faithfulness to the people we were with, that God protected us and that he would protect them. Will you bow your heads with me? Dear Jesus, we love you so much. We're so thankful for you and for who you are. We thank you, God, that we can trust you. And dear Lord, please give us everything we need to do that. I feel like there's somebody in here, some people in here that you need to make a physical commitment. You need to say, God, I'm going to stop looking at my feet. I'm going to trust you. I know that my partial trust is not actually trust. And I want to fully trust you. I want to take that step. I want to walk in the fullness of life that comes and the peace that comes from trusting you completely. If that's you, would you raise your hand? If you want to stop looking at your feet, you want to trust God. I've got my hand up. Dear God, you see our hands, and better yet, you know our hearts. I pray this morning, God, that this would be a reminder to us, Lord, that you're trustworthy, and that no matter what we're going through, God, no matter the circumstance, Lord, that you do not deserve to be doubted. And we declare, God, that we won't. We will stop looking at our feet. We will stop looking at our circumstances. We will stop looking around us at the winds and the waves and the storm. And we will trust you, God, because where you are, fear is unwarranted. Please give us everything we need to do that, God. See our hearts. We love you. In Jesus' name.